All righty, everyone. Good morning and welcome to day 2 of Technology Days. We have a special treat for us this morning. Some dear friends who are going to talk a little bit about seed treatments and looking at the innovation, the risk, but also the reality that is facing seed treatments today here in the U.S. So real quick, go down the line and introduce yourself and who you're with and a little bit about your interaction with seed treatments.
All right, I'll start. I'm Jackie Holland. I am an economist at the American Soybean Association. My team has done several economic impact studies on both the importance of seed treatments as well as farmer compliance with upcoming Endangered Species Act regulations. So taking an economic look at how these types of tools help farmers to be fiscally successful.
Good morning. I'm Jordan Gregory. I am the Director for State Government Affairs for the American Seed Trade Association. We have a wide and diverse membership, and so my interaction with seed treatments is looking at the legislative and regulatory landscape across all 50 states and the U.S. territories. And as you can imagine, that can get pretty complicated pretty fast. 50 different states and some territories. So we look at different legislation that's proposed, how it could affect the farmer in getting these types of products available to them and planted into the ground and what that looks like. We also work on educational efforts for legislators to know exactly what their legislation could be doing to their constituents should it pass as it relates to maybe a ban or a restriction of some sort. So we also work with some educational efforts with Crop Life America to create a treated seed stewardship guide, which we will be releasing in the coming weeks an updated version of. So very excited for that.
Good morning. I'm Jonelle Myers. I'm the seed enhancements lead here for Beck's Hybrids, and I've been here with Beck's for the last 6.5 years. On the day-to-day side of things, we're overseeing Escalate, which is our seed treatment brand. Currently, Beck's treats all corn, soybeans, and wheat for our different brands. And then overseeing some of the research and marketing efforts that go into that and training efforts for our sales staff as well.
Good morning. I'm Jim Herr, and I've been with Beck's for 26 and a half years, and my only real job is trying to keep Jonelle on task. But I'm probably the team historian in some ways up here. I've served on the board for American Seed Trade and have been through a period where we worked on seed treatment, specifically neonicotenoids, with some of the big companies who have since just moved their companies around, right? You have these different sales, but a lot of the same people have been working hard. And American Seed Trade has been completely invaluable in efforts to get out the information and help us understand how we can communicate and preserve these products that are so necessary for farmers to succeed. So really enjoy being a part of that. I've spent a lot of time in it and have a passion for it, which is probably somewhat wears on Jonelle, but we work as a team, and not only are we trying to find the right products, but we're trying to find ways to protect the products that are necessary. And we're also spending time in the pipeline looking for those products that can supplant, like if regulation does get the best of us, what are the next things we can use? So, yeah, thank you.
All right, so let's hit the big question. Why seed treatments? Why do we need seed treatments? Why are growers looking for that seed treatment package? So who wants to start us off this morning a little bit?
I can start off with that one. So a lot of the times when I think of seed treatments, I think of offense and defense. So a lot of the times when you look at a product that we're putting on a seed, it's a defensive product because it's helping fight against or protect against something that maybe we can't take care of otherwise. So it's a below ground pest. It's a pathogen pest that's soil-borne. So without the help of seed treatments, really there's no other way to fight against that. On the flip side, you've got some treatments that I would consider more on the offensive, right? So we're looking to help boost vigor and uniformity and emergence, and they're not really protecting against anything, but it takes both types to help protect the seed, the early seedling against those weather conditions that kind of lead to pathogen pest explosion or insect pest instances as well.
And if you think about the amount of research and development it takes for a seed to go from its initial inception all the way to the market, you want to protect that investment. These companies do, these farmers do. They have to do more with less, more yield with less land, things like that. And so not only are you wanting to protect that genetic investment, you're also wanting to give farmers a sense of stability. And that's what these types of treatments do across the board.
Yes, and there are very real economic impacts to these tools also. I think Jonelle's point about seed treatments being a great defense, it's so important because when we know that when we can get those plants started healthy early, that is going to help us maximize our yield, but also minimize the amount of extra costs that as farmers that we have to put towards getting out that yield. So it's a major cost savings. It boosts revenue. It's really an invaluable tool from an economic standpoint for farmers.
Yeah, from economist to agronomist here. So I was in my life before Beck's. Yes, I'm that old. I used to work in agronomy and help. And in that time frame, there was a methodology coming out called IPM, Integrated Pest Management, that the land grants were working hard at. And I like to apply, because I think it's a very good and right practice, I like to apply the logic of IPM to anything we do in the fields. I've been influenced by it. I was in my 20s, and it's very influential to me. So we think about IPM, we integrate pest management. A lot of times you want to identify the pest before you make an application. You want to make the proper application for the pest, okay, to oversimplify IPM. Well, let's talk about things happening where you can't see them. So in the case of a defensive capability, you'll get people say, well, you don't like a prophylactic effort on a field with a chemical, or we don't want to just be insurance policies. And it's absolutely not what it is. The challenge is we know these pathogens exist in the fields. We know they're there, and you really don't have an IPM methodology other than broad applications. So higher volumes of chemicals being applied if you don't have a seed treatment. And they're economically damaging pathogens. There's a reason we want to protect our seeds from those. And then you go to the insect spectrum. Well, I grew up, doing this a while. And one of the insects that just maddened me, and this is before we had neonicotenoid insecticides we could apply to seed treatments, was a black cutworm. And I'm in Chalmers, Indiana, walking fields, and it looks really good. And then the next day, there's a lot of corn missing. I'm like, what kind of sorcery is this? And I start looking, and I had these worms that were cutting the corn plant off right at the growing point, and basically eliminating its ability to produce anything. And they just run down the row, and I'm like, what do I do about this? Well, you got to spray them, right? So we're going to spray them, and I go, well, okay, we'll spray them. And they go, oh, but you have to spray them when they're up above ground. And so they come up in when it's cooler temperatures. So in the middle of the day when I'm at work, and I got my sprayer guys going, they're not there. So you can just spray and just say, well, good job, but you didn't kill anything. So you think about that, just that pest alone, the impact that had on those farmers in those situations and trying to spray in dusk or in the morning, trying to handle a pest that today is completely controlled by seed treatment at a much lower dose. So I get a little bit excited about this. I think IPM is represented by seed treatments because we're putting on what's necessary at low dose, low loads. We're not looking for this to be a major problem that we would face if we went back in time and putting, some pretty serious organophosphate products in furrow or T-band and using spray insecticides and stuff. I mean, there's some horror stories about that. So I don't want to get over dramatic about it, but seed treatment is absolutely a more responsible ecological tool.
So, Jim, you kind of started leading off into this. Jordan, I want to pick your brain. So you talked a little bit about a stewardship guide. So talk with us about what you guys are doing with collaboration with a few others and what this guide is to do to help growers and the communities.
Yeah, thanks for giving me that opportunity. So the Seed Treatment Stewardship Guide is an initiative that is run by both ASTA and CropLife America and has partners with American Farm Bureau, with the cotton groups, the corn groups, sorghum. So we've got quite a bit of support, both from a seed perspective and also from a grower perspective. And what this guide does, so it was originally crafted in 2017 and underwent a massive update in the last couple of years due to that increased presence of it being in conversation both on a legislative and a regulatory space, but also farmers needing to use it even more. So we decided to do a big update to it. But what this guide does is it goes through proper handling methods, be that from the time it's picked up or shipped out to the time it needs to be disposed of. And so that processing and handling of treated seed, we recognize that, oftentimes it is a pesticide of some sort put on the seed treatment. There are plenty of seed treatments that have different types of materials put on them, but we want to make sure regardless of what is put on that seed, that you're handling it in a safe and effective manner that is not hazardous to your business, to yourself, things like that. We believe in proper handling and stewardship of those products. It also helps showcase how to use it most efficiently, right? How are you planting efficiently? What are the optimal conditions? Things like that. And it has been peer reviewed time and time again. But it's a resource that is not just for farmers. Other applicators can use it as well. And it pulls from a lot of resources that the federal government has already put out. Some of the state governments have already put out. And it is what we consider to be a foundational guideline for the usage of treated seed across the nation.
So to that point, I've used it as a nice guide just to remember and remind. We know a lot of that in the seed business, and sharing that with farmers and even the community. It's an unbelievably effective document, and it's over the years to become the guide on how to effectively use and safely handle seed treatments.
Right. And we wanted to make sure that when we wrote this guide, there's so much technical jargon out there, and you can get really bogged down and confused very quickly on what this phrase means or that phrase means. And so when we wrote it, we wanted to keep that in mind, that we make it as easy and accessible to read and use and understand as possible. And so that is what we did moving forward. And I promise you, I haven't paid Jim to be this complimentary of ASTA, I swear. But man, I'll get you ice cream later, I promise.
Well, I had my fingers in the first one, so.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, so we've talked about some of the benefits. Jackie, let's flip and go to the economist side of you. And I want to pick your brain on a survey that you guys recently done in the last year or so, and talk with us about what the farmers are saying through this survey and how beneficial it is.
Yes. So we surveyed just under 500 farmers growing 150 acres or more of soybeans across the 17 primary soybean growing states. And we've 90% of our respondents said that they did use seed treatments. The most common seed treatment was used for fungicide and then insecticide. So we know specifically that these tools are very widely used, and they're very effective too. 37% of our respondents said that if we took away, or if seed treatments were to become banned, if they weren't able to use them, that they anticipate that they would face a 6 to 10% yield loss. Just for perspective, kind of looking at where prices have been, if you're looking at 52 bushel per acre yield. That translates to about a 4 bushel loss. 4 bushels at around today's prices, that's about a $43 per acre loss. If you have a farm that's 1,500 acres, you're looking at a $65,000 change in operating revenue just by not being able to use this one tool. That's so significant, especially in the economic environment that farmers are facing right now. We know that prices are not supportive of what you all are paying in input costs. So as farmers, you need to be maximizing your yield potential to try to make up for that delta. And when you don't have your yields, you don't have the revenue to pay for these higher cost items like fertilizer and pesticides. So it's an issue that has so many impacts at all different levels of the supply chain. And farmers recognize that. They know how those dollars turn over in their operations, and they are very worried about protecting them.
So let's think about like a geographic area. Jim, Jonelle, Jackie, I know you guys have talked a little bit about like some of the geographic benefits, but also like if we were to lose this critical tool, what's that looking like on an impact in some of those geographical locations?
I can start with that. So our study found the majority of farmers expect that a 6 to 10% yield loss. Majority of those farmers are along the Mississippi River Valley. But in the northern plains and the southeast, our soybean growers indicated that they expect those yield losses to be higher. They expect those yield losses to be closer to 11 to 15%. And Michigan and Missouri, those growers indicated that they could see yield losses of up to 20% or more without seed treatments. So these are very meaningful economic impacts, just with different levels of negative effects in different areas as well. So
I think when we think about the geographic side of things, a lot of that has to do with pests, right? So if you think, we talked about Michigan and Missouri. So a lot of times we see cyst pressures in some of those sandier soils in Michigan. Missouri oftentimes gets hit with sudden death syndrome and some of the other pathogen pests. So a lot of times it's dependent on what the spectrum is that year for what's bothering soybeans, corn in that case. When we think about that Delta region, there's a lot of insect pressure down there because the southern states don't get that winter kill on a lot of insect species like we do up here to the north. So I think it's going to have a different economic impact based on regionality because of pest pressures.
So one size is definitely not fitting all with this.
No, but I think that one thing, for instance, like let's look at Pythium. Pythium is a pathogen pest that hits both corn and soybeans. We've got some very effective fungicides that take care of Pythium for us, but I think there's a misconception that Pythium is just one beast. And if you've heard my talks, you've heard me say this. So I worked at Ohio State at the soybean pathology lab for a number of years, and Pythium's not just one beast. There's 10, 12 species that impact both corn and soybeans. So there's some regionality behind what species might be there, but say in Minnesota or in Michigan compared to what's here in Ohio and Indiana, but it's still the species is different, but it's still the same. We've still got to go after that with that same fungicide package as well to take care of those. So you've got some regionality, but a lot of times for Beck's in itself, we can put a fungicide, say, on our corn. One of them that's really good on Pythium is ethoboxam, and that's going to take care of a whole host of species of Pythium races, or not races, but species behind the Pythium side of things. So,
Yeah, just adding on, there is a regionality to pest, but fortunately, there's a more universality of the ingredients we can use in, say, our Escalate product from Beck's. So when we're selecting, we are looking, we'll say, we have a really higher risk of field phytophthora issues in Ohio in those wetter, tighter soils than we would be in maybe Nebraska, right? But in the end, some of the products we're using there help with the rhizoctonia that shows up in the western drier regions. So there's a lot of capability if you're responsible on your ingredient selections for a more of a one size like we've modeled at Beck's, and not overload the seed by adding something new for every area. So there's a balance there that I think with Jonelle's work and a lot of our suppliers, we're able to strike that balance and get a universality in terms of our treatment. And again, you get that consistency and understanding of the product and how to handle and use it.
So something that has been a common theme that I've heard the last couple of days now is what's good for the farmer, what's good for the environment. Jim, you've alluded to a little bit of the innovation and really what we are taking a look at. Jonelle, you and I have talked a little bit about this, the difference between hard chemistries, biologicals. Talk with us a little bit about what you guys are researching, what you're looking at to try to help our growers and that soil and the environment.
I'm going to set Jonelle up because she's the subject matter expert, at least in my group, right? But the setup is, for years, we've challenged anybody that wants to come to Beck's and provide an ingredient. We say, we want a biological that'll do this. And we're very specific on these, right? And it doesn't mean we're trying to make a change to biological, but if you want to come with a biological, I don't need you coming and telling me that it does something that I never really needed to do. So we're pretty demanding on the innovators, and whether it's somebody developing something in their kitchen or it's a multinational, and I'll let Jonelle talk more about that.
Yeah, I have a wish list, and I think he says demands. I like to think of it more as a wish list. As, hey, it'd be really cool if we could do X, Y, and Z. It'd be really cool if we could pair a biological with a hard chemistry. So one of the advantages of a hard chemistry or synthetic is that it's going to perform the same every single time, right? Whereas a biological that may have to germinate, that may have to sporulate, it may act a little bit differently in different weather conditions. So what we try to do is kind of take a look at what those conditions are, pair things together, and make sure that we kind of understand best how some of these biologicals do perform, because I think there's for sure a place for both the synthetic and the biologicals in our packages and for our farmers. I think that's the benefit to them, is that there's a lot of the biologicals coming out. And so sometimes it's hard to dig through some of the weeds, and it's a little stressful, but I think if we can dig through them, and that's part of what I do in trials every year. For instance, this year in 2025, we've got about 60 locations across our marketing area where we're looking at just soybean seed treatment, and about 40 locations where we're looking at just corn seed treatment. And those can be biologicals, hard chemistries, nematicides, insecticides, so on and so forth. So we really are just trying to keep a broad look at what's out there and how it can help benefit our farmers.
So let's think a little bit outside, beyond the science. We've heard a little bit from states. Jordan, I want to pick your brain on this. We know the benefits. We understand what these tools are doing. You hear the innovation that's going on. Talk with us about the pressure that we are starting to face now on the state level side of regulatory and policies.
Oh, definitely. So we wrapped up a pretty large legislative session in May and June of this year. All 50 states were in some sort of legislative session. So when I talk about that complicated, the complication of watching all of the states, there's different time frames, different priorities, different political party makeups, things like that you're having to watch out for. But what we're seeing trend-wise the most is each coast is taking a very hard look at seed treatment usage within their own state, and sometimes without doing the work ahead of time, they are more reactive to certain groups, and they will propose all-out bans. And typically for these seed treatments, it is really focused in on neonic treated seeds, I will say. But there's always something that could get wrapped in there on accident, right? There's always unintended consequences that happen when you do broad strokes of legislation to potentially target one specific thing. So we see a lot of that on each coast, but it's not as far as you think, right? Here in Indiana, there was a bill that was introduced to raise awareness around treated seed usage in the state. And the author, when asked, said they just wanted to raise awareness for it. But that can be alarming. That can trigger a couple of alarm bells, because that's usually step one, right, towards a ban of some sort. We're seeing some other states in the Midwest start to look at either bans or get more critical views on what that usage looks like, that product coming in or going out of the state could look like. And we have to use these as opportunities to educate. What are these products? How does a farmer use them? And to reassure that these legislators that our farmers are the number one stewards of the land. I mean, goodness gracious, they couldn't have a livelihood if they didn't properly steward their land. And they're utilizing these products in such an efficient way to reduce the amount of chemical or the amount of other products that are put into the soil, to raise up that soil health and to get a good yield, a stable yield, to feed a growing nation. And so we take every opportunity that we can get to educate those legislators, work with those state departments of ag for the education of their seed control officials on different challenges that seed companies face, that their farmers face, that maybe they don't interact with quite as often. And we do it across all of the states. We actively are working with the Minnesota Department of Ag. We're working with the Vermont Department of Ag, California, different things like that. We have great, strong working relationships that we will continue to utilize as those pressures continue to come down. But at the end of the day, the most effective advocate for the use of these products is the farmer, is the constituent there. And I cannot stress enough how important it can be daunting to go and try and talk to your local legislator, but they want to hear from their constituents. And if they're only hearing one side of the story, that's the only side they care about. So they need to hear the other side too.
All right. So as we wrap up, I want to ask you for what's one tangible action item, call to action, that you want growers to think about, to do, to perform, to act on? What's that one tangible item to help protect this important seed treatment tool that we've got?
I'll start. In our survey, we did ask farmers what alternatives they would use to seed treatments. The answers were not popular. We looked at lower seeding population rates, increased pesticide application, increased foliar applications, increased pesticide applications at planting, and later planting dates. I know you all know, there's a reason that we don't use those anymore. But I think as you're looking at your operation, I don't think it hurts to consider how these types of alternative practices would impact your bottom line, and being able to voice those pitfalls to your legislators, to your trade associations, because there aren't good, feasible alternatives to the benefits that seed treatments provide. And again, farmers are not in an economy where they can be affording to lose any yields or increasing costs whatsoever. So knowing what the risks are and being able to communicate that forward so that you can be more proactive about protecting this tool is going to be invaluable for you as farmers if this does become a more a more significant risk.
You know, I think I said my action item at the end of my last answer, but I'll say it again. It's all about education and advocacy to those state legislatures. Things move so fast on the states because things move so slowly up in Washington, D.C. And I know in my heart of hearts, I come from a farming background. All of my neighbors are either in corn or wheat or sorghum, and I know they want nothing more than to be left alone and do their job and do it well and raise their families. But when a legislator interferes with that, it's time for the farmer to step up and start to educate and advocate about what goes on their farm and what tools they need to be successful on that farm. And so it can be very daunting to go to your state capitol, to go talk to your district legislator, but it is so impactful. They get to hear the stories. They get to see the real life consequences of these arbitrary actions that they put on these state legislative dockets. And so if you can advocate even just once a year, going to your legislator and making sure they know who you are and what you do, and even inviting them out to your farm if you want to take it one step further, but just going and talking to them and having a conversation can move mountains in a way that other actions cannot. So I would say get out and advocate for your ability to use these products on your farm so that you can have that stability in such a tumultuous economic time.
I think I'm going to go with slow down, especially in the spring. We're going like crazy. I would say hit the pause button and think for a second how your spring might be a little bit different if we don't have seed treatments available. What that looks like as far as, the recommended delayed planting or, just sit back and think, because a lot of times that seed treatment's on there. We've been used to having it on there, but what might it look like if we don't have that? So hit the pause button. And I think that once people sit back and think about that and how that may change their operation, then they're going to be willing to touch base with somebody to communicate a little bit more about how might this impact my operation.
Yeah, very good. So I have sat on a board of a county board for Indiana Farm Bureau. I've sat on American Seed Trade committees and board. I'm currently the past chair of the Agribusiness Council of Indiana, and so that doesn't mean anything about me, but I do know what I've learned through those roles is it's a team game. So I really think as a farmer, because I'm a farmer too, so if you haven't picked up on it, I have this great career at Beck's, and then I'm foolish enough to go farm and dispense of all money I may have made here. But that being said, it's a team game, and a lot of times as farmers, we're not great at joining teams. To your point about just let me do my thing here, and I've got work to do, and I'll go to church, and I'll live my life and go to a ball game. It's really easy if you plug in with your organizations that are out there that are helping you. Kayla's working diligently for Beck's, Jordan at Seed Trade. And we need to plug in as farmers to those people and magnify our voice. To go to the State House and advocate is nerve-wracking. Just sometimes crafting an email to a legislator is something you don't love to do. Well, most of the time you don't love to do that. All of that said, there are channels, organizations you can seek out. It doesn't cost money. They're here. They're on your side. They're advocating. Go join in those voices. Learn what works for you in terms of your ability as a farmer to make an impact on legislation. And if you don't know, ask.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for joining us today, and we look forward to the next conversation.